Hello, welcome everybody. Happy Wednesday. I know that I say this every week that I'm so excited for this topic, but I really am excited about today. I think you guys are all going to love this conversation. Um, Moving all my stuff to get us all set up. And what I love about what we're going to be chatting about today is we're going to be talking about intuition. And this is what I personally feel like this is the magic that runs through all of us. And it's essential in creating the business. So, as online businessers out there, business managers that are creating their own business, it is the one, I think it's that magic element that makes things flow. And I love when I get to work with someone and I see them recognize their own gifts of intuition and then they're pairing that with their OBM skills. And then that's when their businesses flourish. So excited about our guest today to expand on all of this. And if you're wondering exactly how to make all this happen, just stay tuned. If you're new here, I am Leah, COO here at Prowess Project, filling in for Ashley Connell. And what we do is we support women that are being led to become online business managers. We help coach, train, and then match them up with their ideal clients of CEOs that are looking for an OBM that needs their skills. So to get things kicked off in the chat today, what percentage of the time would you say that you are using your gut, that gut instinct, that intuition versus like logic? Just this is what I know I'm supposed to do, so that's what I'm doing. And I will say personally, like I'm always trying to listen to that intuition. I'm trying to stay present in that moment, but as things start happening, we get busy. I know that I just default to what's on that checklist. All right, I'll let you guys drop those comments in chat. And I can't wait to get to our guest. So we're going to pull up Shoshanna French. She is joining us. She is a speaker, a coach. She is the founder of Simple Spirit. And welcome, Shoshanna. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Hi, and hi everyone in the comments and chat, and I love it. I am an intuitive leadership strategist, which is a mouthful. Let's be honest, that's a lot of words all in a row. Essentially, what I do is I'm not your regular Joe Schmo business coach. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm definitely a strategist, which kind of takes tools and things that help us be better at what we do, whether it's being a better partner, business owner, operations, if that's our thing, but tools that help us be better at what we do, combined with strategies, which are actions for how to take what we're already good at with new tools and then allow us to really fulfill and be the best leaders we can, whether we're leading our own team, our own organization, or we get hired to lead somebody else's organization or team. So that's what I do. I've been doing it for 20 years, January of this year. So I've been doing it for a hot minute.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
excellent.
you.
I would love to know how you got to, now you said intuitive leadership
Strategist.
strategist. How did you
Yep.
get from wherever you started to there?
Uh, how much time do we have, Leah? Okay, just kidding. So, way back when I originally started a business was in 2005. And initially, I was a psychic because that was what I knew. I knew how to sit with people and listen and hear the things they couldn't hear. Some of it is, I think, just my natural intuitive ability, my ability to hear and read people and that kind of thing. But the other part of it was the training that I had had when I was 18. I learned all about intuition and did like a deep dive, kind of more the metaphysical side of things with some women in college. And when I started as a psychic, I was really, really good at it. I had clients in 25 countries. I grew very fast and was kind of on a pathway to becoming a world famous psychic, and went into a business, class. And I'm sure people get this. I went into a class and the guy said, is that what you want to do? You want to be a world famous psychic? And I was like, heck no, definitely not. I don't want to be like, Mama Cleo and there's nothing wrong with being a psychic. I just knew that I wanted more than that. And so what he told me, and this is now, how I ended up where I'm at, really, that was like the first major pivot in 2012, was to quantify intuition, which no one that ever taught me had never quantified intuition to me. Intuition was sort of like this hard to touch, kind of, in the ethos, not real thing. And so that's where I started. I started from, how do I quantify intuition? How do I develop a way to train anybody? I don't care what their background is. I don't care what their spiritual beliefs are or no spiritual beliefs. How do I train anyone how to recognize that we all have this, how to recognize their own, and then how to apply it in life? And that was kind of the first program I offered. And then, how business goes over the years as I changed as a person and learned a lot. I mean, 20 years in business, you learn a lot, business acumen. What I recognize is I love working with leaders, because when I train really smart people, and mostly I work with women, but when I train smart people, they then can really impact other people. So then my work has sort of this exponential impact, and that's way more interesting to me. So how I ended up as an intuitive leadership strategist specifically is, I'm in a business accelerator right now, and I'm going from simple spirit to Shoshanna French consulting, because I can kind of get like, that's the next iteration. And when we interviewed 10 of my clients, that is the title they gave me. And so
Like,
that does not come from my mouth or my brain. It came from my client, the words of my clients. So that's how I ended up. And now that I've, been kind of sitting with it for a month, I can see when my clients call me that. And as a strategist, I have a lot more freedom. As a consultant, I have a lot more freedom to combine a lot of things together that maybe a coach wouldn't, right? And so, or an intuitive for that matter. So I combine a whole bunch of things together. So that's how I ended up where I am.
I love it. And I love that you like opening that up for your clients to kind of, offer up the name. I think that's amazing on so many different levels. And I love the one that they gave you. That is fantastic.
Well, and it makes sense, because what I thought I was doing, right? There's always like, and this is for everybody, by the way, as an OBM, there's what you think your skills and gifts are. And then there's what the people that you serve and really appreciate you would say about your gifts and skills. And what I would have said was like, oh, I train people to be more intuitive. But honestly, that's not what my client said. What my client said is that they then felt confidence to be more bold and take bigger risks and fulfill on the vision they had, which is a very different thing than being more intuitive. Like, the truth is, of course, they're more intuitive, but that's not actually the results they were focused on. They were more focused on how they could be better in their work and make more of a difference. So, and I just want to say, like, I like to define what intuition is from my definition after, 30 years of marinating myself in the practice. Intuition is a direct way of knowing or understanding something without any prior experience.
That's fantastic. Do you find that most people are intuitive but don't step into it? Or like the clients that come to you, it's maybe a better way to ask it. Clients that come to you, are they saying, I know I'm intuitive, help me use this in my business? Or are they saying, I know that I could be doing more, I want to be helping more, and you are helping giving them this avenue of introducing them to the concept of intuition?
I would say I could answer that in probably two ways for clarity. So, one is the clients that find me, what they're often saying is, okay, I'm in this new really high level position, and it's really high pressure, and every decision has a lot of ripples that it makes. And I am noticing that I am experiencing some imposter syndrome, and I'm a really confident, ambitious, and smart woman. I don't know why I'm experiencing that. So that's kind of how they find me, because they've heard from somebody else, again, what my clients say, like, she will help you gain confidence in yourself and trust yourself in those really like high level, high, not risk, but like high pressure kind of, like for example, one of my clients recently found herself in a meeting where she was brokering a $550 million deal.
No
So
pressure at all. No
no
pressure.
pressure, right? Oh my gosh. And what she told me, which was so cool, is she said, what I noticed in the moment of the meeting was not your voice in my head, but my own voice in my head saying, okay, what is it that I really want? She was like, I took the permission, which is one of my concepts, permission to pause, which is counterintuitive when you're in high pressure moments, to take that moment to pause. So that's like one of the things that, leaders can do for themselves. So that's what my clients are saying when they want to work with me. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm stressed and this doesn't make any sense because like I got this position from all my work and like, but now I'm like, scared and I don't know why. And so that's kind of where we start. However, what often I find is that most people, and it's rare, I mean, I've trained 10,000 people. So it's rare that I meet someone who's not like, well, I mean, I think I had like that experience one time. Most people, what they'll say is, oh, that's what intuition is? Yeah, I use that all the time. I just didn't know that's what it was. And so then really my goal as a strategist is to help them like learn what has them ignore it, argue with it, or choose something else. Like, why? Why would you hire that person, even though they look great on paper, but inside of you, it just didn't quite feel right? Like, why? Like, what is it that has you do that? And so that's sort of that's the work I do, right? We talk about how your intuition works. We do the inner deep transformational work, like what's going on. And then we do the how do you connect that? How do you become embodied in your intuitive leadership? So that's sort of how I work with people and then how they become, for their own selves, intuitive leaders.
That I like how you just break this. So you're making it sound very simple of like, right? Like in recognizing those parts of us that are, like you say, they're already happening. People just might not, didn't attach that name to it. Are there other things that you can share with the audience of, like you said, like it's that voice they might be hearing in their head or they're second guessing, other ways to identify what that might be?
Yeah. So intuition sort of shows up in our bodies in kind of four distinct ways. So if you're watching this right now and you're in the comments, I will love to hear this question, and whoever's typing the notes for the people watching, you could put this in there. There are four ways that our body translates. The first is like gut, which is often what I find people talk about, like, oh, like I just had this feeling in my gut. That's one way. Second way is you just hear something that someone is not saying. You are like listening to them talk and you're like, there's more to this story than what they're telling me, or there's more to this problem than what they're saying. It's sort of like a psychic hearing, right? And then sometimes you just know things, right? Someone says, this happened to a client of mine. She was sitting with her tech guy and he was like, I'm telling you, this can't be solved. Like, we've been working at this for 2 weeks. There's no way to program this thing that you want. It doesn't exist. And all of a sudden into her head was a word she didn't know. And she said it. And he was like, huh, that's interesting. And so he did some like click clack and they figured out the problem. And he was like, how did you know that? And she was like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Like the solution just pops in your brain like a fully formed thought. If you love, I love, what is the name of that book? And she has a podcast, We Can Do Hard Things.
Yes.
Yeah, she talks about it as an inner voice, right? So like she said, you listen and sort of like, things. So that's a knowing. And then the last one is just like you look at either people, situations, and in your mind, either in your mind's eye or maybe what you would think is your physical sight, something looks off to you. A book that I love that sort of kind of talks about this is the book Blink, by
Okay.
Malcolm Gladwell. It's an old book, but it talks about those decisions we make in like that 5 second or less kind of blink, right? So four ways: either you feel something, gut instinct, something like a solution, you see something, or you hear something. And for most people, you have some combination of all four of those. But what I find, I work with leaders and they'll say, oh, like when I'm sitting with like my team and they're like talking about the problems and all the solutions come into my mind, you're telling me that's intuition. Yep, that's intuition. But what I'll say is, for everybody listening, is that those four ways of translating, our intuition is really quiet. It's much quieter than the other two ways that are kind of like either our intellect, like what we know, our experience, our beliefs, our education, other people's opinions. That is way louder than the subtle voice of our intuition. The other thing that's actually louder is our emotional reactions to things. So one of the things
Absolutely.
you have to learn is, how do you get quiet enough, right? How do you understand, one, what your emotional reaction is to messing up your new job, right? You're in these really, like, every decision has a huge impact and most of them are complex. The higher climb you do in leadership, the more difficult the decisions that you have to make are. So how do you quiet down that pressure that you're giving yourself or others are giving you, so you can hear that more subtle, quiet voice? And the other thing to know is that intuition is not about solving problems. That's what intellect is for. Your logic is for solving problems. Intuition isn't for that. Intuition is for innovation. It's for possibility. It gains you insight, right? To be able to see into something, to give you deeper understanding that you can't gain like you would if you were using your logic. That's kind of the subtle difference.
Which I absolutely love because I feel like I'm hearing like almost like permission. Like it's okay to have that part of our day that is the logic driven, the what we know we have to do, but then when we want to step into that creativity, like to pause and listen is what I'm hearing. Like
Yeah.
give yourself that space.
I I give a talk that I've given to lots of people called The Power of Pause, how to have confidence and make bold moves. Because when we get quiet, and this is for all of us, and this is not just in business, though it's very helpful in business, it's in all areas of life. So if you have an area of life where you have a lot of emotional attachment, it's harder to hear your intuition, like your family. Like I find that family decisions, things like, who should host a holiday event, or does it make sense to address the elephant in the room or not? Those kind of wonderings. My intuition, it's real quiet because what's really loud is my emotional attachment to my family and whatever else is there. At work, sometimes what can happen is you could take a class about, I don't know, marketing or social media, and you're getting ready to do things exactly like the class says, but something inside of you is telling you that's not right. It's hard to hear your intuition through all the things that you know. So the permission to pause is the practice of, I would call it like radical self-awareness, so that you can recognize what are my own sort of, you know, totally present, not bad understandings of how things work. Because sometimes your logic is great, but sometimes, and this is what I say all the time, and I'm sure all of us get this, especially you guys as OBMs, sometimes the data you get is conflicting. So, what part of the data do you trust? And intuition can help guide you to which part to pay attention to. And people are super complicated, like way complicated. We act in ways against our own desires sometimes. So, intuition is super helpful with humans because humans are complex. So, the more complex the decision, the more complex the thing or situation, the more useful intuition is, because it does help you understand what's useful and what's not. But you do have to get quiet, like you really do. And it's not always easy. I'm a thinker. So I wake up and my brain is instantly awake. I don't know for how many of you that's the same, but whew, I got to wrestle that mind
Absolutely.
sometimes.
So what does that practicing the pause look like for our
Mm.
logic brain people like that, like steps? What does that look like during the day?
So what I say is that one, you need to have movement because it's actually what our brain is designed for. There's this great book called Go Wild. It just talks about we have the most complex brain of any animal on the planet because we have the most complex physical movement. So moving your body helps your brain get quiet. Now, there are lots of different kinds of movement. For some people, they're like a walk. Walk is great. For some people, they get on their rebounder and they're like bounce around. Me, I like intense exercise, get on the Peloton, like whatever your thing is. So, physical movement is one aspect. And then right after that, some kind of reflection practice. So, if you're someone who's never meditated before and the thought of it makes like your insides clench uncontrollably, don't try meditation, do something else. So, take out a journal and use like journal reflection. You can find great prompts, like great journal prompts to kind of guide thinking for yourself. So that's my recommendation. If though you're like, okay, well fine, what's meditation look like? It's really 5 to 10 minutes, because meditation itself is one about taking the pause, but it's also about the opportunity to kind of like unplug and learn what that feels like so that you can replicate it later when you need it again.
I was listening to someone on a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about how meditation actually helps create new pathways in your brain because
Yep.
you're planning out. If you focus on what you want it to happen, you're making that happen in your brain, which I just found so fascinating.
Our brains are plastic. So when people talk about neuroplasticity, that's what they're talking about. Like our brain has a way, like what they used to think way back in the day. And this may seem like a tangent, but this is like one of the areas of like study that I find totally fascinating, because asking people to become intuitive leaders is asking them to develop new habits. And to understand how habits are formed in the brain means you need to better understand how neural pathways are formed in the brain. Now, they thought for a long time that all these different parts of our brain were the only place in the brain where that function happened. That's not true anymore. They've done a lot of experiments because people would have strokes and like it would affect one part of the brain, but then their brain would rewire and then they would be able to move again, even though that part of the brain that used to, be the thing to move their left arm was basically damaged. It didn't matter. The brain rerouted those neural pathways so they could move their left arm again. So it caused them to do a lot of study. So how that relates to this conversation is that it's not a one and done. It's like brushing your teeth. If all you did was brush your teeth once a year, your dentist would love you. They'd make a lot of money on you, but you'd have a mouthful of rotten teeth. So if you want to become an intuitive leader and you want to learn how to, adapt intuitive decision making so that you spend less time in analysis paralysis and really overthinking and being overwhelmed, you have to adopt it as a habit. So when I was talking about permission to pause, and we were talking about pause, that has to become a habit. So as an example, like if you decide you want to get healthier and you have a habit of waking up 15 minutes before you need to like throw some clothes on and get on your first Zoom call, one of the habits you'll have to adopt is waking up 30 minutes earlier to have time to make a shake and move your body. Like those are the things I'm going to adopt before, to get healthier. So what I just say to people is, how do you normally prepare for your meetings? Like, how do you prep for your meetings? Do you spend an hour reviewing and making an agenda? Like, what are all the different things you do? Add in 5 to 10 minutes of that pausing kind of practice so that you can go inward and just ask, what is there that I need to know about this meeting that I haven't acknowledged yet? What, if anything, am I missing that would have this meeting be more effective? What am I feeling about this meeting? So then that way you can actually check in. If you're like, oh, I feel really uncomfortable, then you can inquire using your journal to find out what you're actually feeling uncomfortable about, to allow kind of it to, arise in inquiry. So that's what it actually looks like, is you have to adopt that habit.
I love this, and I hope everyone's writing these down because I think this is so powerful of giving yourself that permission. Like you're saying, because a lot of times OBMs, we're getting ready for the meeting for other people, or we have a project that we want to be successful for our client. And we don't often take time to pause for what we need as just a human to feel really good, right? We started this business for flexibility and freedom, and then we get so busy during the day. So taking this time for yourself to put back almost that enjoyment, right? Or what is it that you, like you said, you need out of this? I just think that's one, it's so healthy, but two, I think it can create that balance that why we're doing this in the first place.
Well, and what I would say, like just to connect it to what OBMs do, is I've had clients recognize that they feel a little bit uneasy about something. And because they're, being trained to trust sort of that like uneasiness, like as a communication of something, they know to pause and check in. Like, is this an emotional reaction because I'm going into a really important meeting? This is a new client, and I want to have them feel like that they hired me correctly, like they can trust me. Or is this feeling like an intuitive communication, like a something that maybe I tracked or knew or felt or saw, and I need to like pause and like pull it into my conscious awareness so that I can show up better prepared for a meeting. So I had a client who was like walking into a client meeting like in 4 hours. So 4 hours before the meeting, she was like putting together the agenda. She's like a high level, I call her a highfalutin project manager. So she's probably more like what OBMs do. And she was like getting ready for this meeting and she just felt really uneasy. So she did her practice and she's like, no, it's not like nervousness or a feeling of being self-conscious about being in this really big meeting. It's something else. And what she sort of tapped into and recognized when she looked was that the VA for the company that she was working for had sent out a link that didn't work, and
Oh,
no one caught it. They sent it out to 45 people, including her, and no one caught it. And the meeting was like, this was a big meeting. And it's like, not, here's the thing. Intuition isn't like a don't go on that plane, it's going to crash. Like, can that happen? Yes. But sometimes it just creates more ease. Like it just gives you a heads up. It can be like that too. She was able to reach out to the VA 2 hours before. So the VA didn't look like an a-hole, which none of us like to look like, but also because she wanted to move into that meeting with everyone calm because they were about to roll out a huge thing. Change management was going to be in the room. The CEO was in the room. She was there as the highfalutin project manager to roll out the changes. And like anything that would add extra stuff to a kind of already stressful meeting was not needed. So like that's what that feeling was. And the moment that she recognized what it was, she was able to like pinpoint what happened. That feeling in her body went away because that's how intuition works. That's sort of how you know the difference between just some like feeling a discomfort emotionally versus an intuitive message. Once you track and acknowledge the intuitive message and take action on it, the feeling goes away. If you're having a emotional reaction to something and you recognize it, it doesn't go away until you process the emotion. That's sort of the difference.
oh, thank you so much for sharing that because I think that's huge too. Because I think people can doubt that feeling that they're getting and being like, well, what is this? Right. Or is it just, I have allergies, right? We want to like
Right,
logically
right.
put it somewhere. And because it can kind of be, well, I think for some people it might feel uncomfortable to be like, wait, my intuition is telling, like, right, we're not going to stop a meeting and be like, I have to listen to my intuition. We might not feel comfortable in that room saying that, but that's a great distinction. I love that.
Well, and I was just going to say, like, I know our conversation is about being confident in decision making, and there are places where we feel already really confident in our decision making. What I find is that intuition provides confidence in the places where you notice that maybe, imposter syndrome or overwhelm or just analysis paralysis, where you're like, maybe not, I don't know. And then we gather more information. And what happens for people is sometimes it's rare, but for the most part, gathering more information doesn't actually help you make a decision because we live in a time of emotion of information overload. So like more information usually does not provide clarity. Like we usually have to let things sit for a moment. You gather more information, now you have even more conflicting data, and then you really don't know what to do, which is frustrating when people are looking to you to make decisions.
Yes. And one thing that's popping up for me is that, and I would love if you can expand on this, is that I have a theory that OBMs are actually, they do have a lot of intuition that goes into their everyday and whether they recognize it or not. And I think if OBMs sat down and kind of wrote down times where they're like, oh yeah, it was just an instinctual thing for me to check and then realize this, or it was just the idea that popped up and that was what solved the problem, or I felt like I should reach out to that person and then realize they weren't even aware of the meeting, right? Making that list of your success stories could help you kind of strengthen this.
Agreed. I think that's great. I mean, one of my favorite writers who talked about intuition, she would talk, her name is Sonia Choquette, and what she would talk about is having an occurrence journal. To me, it's
Oh,
like, it's the same kind of thing. So when, I write a LinkedIn newsletter every week. And last month, I'm kind of like focusing on themes. And last month, I talked about trusting your intuition, which is our conversation today. And every newsletter for the month of February was about ways to build trust in your intuition. And one of them was, when you notice that you feel stuck and uncertain, you know, uh, do that sort of inner reflection. And times when you're really, really clear, but you don't know why, capture those too. Because
oh,
over time, you start to notice you notice a pattern of, oh, I can trust, kind of like that innate sense I have of what feels right, even when I don't have data to back it up. But now I do have data because I have 8 of those written down in the last 6 weeks. And every time things worked out better than if I had just used my brain. Like this was just a recognized knowing or a sense of something, and I followed it, and wow, look at that, it really worked out. So sometimes it's okay to want to gather data. Like, we live in a very logical, very linear world. So the intuition is part of the unseen. It's like any other soft skill. Communication is also a soft skill, and you can see when it goes bad. Like we all can see, it's real obvious. And the same goes for intuition. When we when we don't listen to it, oh, you know what hits the fan. You're like, oh, I knew not to do that. I felt like that was the wrong thing to do, but we just did it anyway. And then, we have to kind of deal with the outcome of that, where literally we go, I knew better. And that's often what I find with people when they start to learn how to trust their intuition is lots of stories like that. Oh man, I really did know better. I wonder why I didn't listen. That's such a bummer.
Yes. I think, well, one, they're great things to learn from, right? Those are like our lessons. And then I think you shorten that time period when you identify them. Um, I have one question though, and it's going back to kind of the leadership piece of it too. What if you're working with a team that isn't as receptive to someone who is practicing all of this?
Yeah, such a good question. I find that it doesn't actually matter if you're using intuition, or if let's say you're an IBM, you get hired by a company and no one knows you. So you haven't proven to the people on the team that you can be trusted yet. It's actually no different. So it doesn't matter if you say, well, my standard practice, and I've been doing this for 20 years, is to do X, Y, Z. I know you guys had a different SOP before I got here, but I got hired because what I can do is bring something, blah, 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 blah. So whether you're saying, I had a dream last night and this is not going to work out, or if you say, like, I've been doing this for 20 years and the way you guys do things, there's a reason why I got hired. So what I would say is for me, it's always a matter of, one, like, where are you about whatever your expertise is, or this, I don't know, knowing or feeling you have. Like, check in with yourself first. Do you feel clear about it? And then two, check your audience. How receptive are they to your ideas, whatever they are? Like, you're not speaking into a vacuum, right? Are you the third OBM that's been hired? Are you the first OBM, but you're the second, person? The last person was an employee and it didn't work out. They fired them and decided they wanted an OBM instead, right? Like, who are you talking to? Know your audience. And then the third is use language that lands. Just use language that lands. So if you're talking to non-woo people, which, hello, like, some people are really religious, but not very woo. And so find a way to say something like, I have kind of a thought about this based on our last meeting. Could I share my thought about it? You could say it that way. You could say, this is going to sound weird, but I just, like, based on all this information we have, like, something about it doesn't feel right. I don't quite know. Could we go over it again? Like, find a way to translate for yourself what it is that you're getting that is not landing for people.
Yes. And so would you say that there's a blend? Because what I'm hearing you say is like using your emotional intelligence, right? Your communication
Absolutely.
skills. Would you say
Yes,
intuition
exactly.
and EQ, like, do they kind of just overlap or are they different?
They're different. So I would say emotional, like, EQ, is a soft skill that, if you're going to be a leader of any variety, it's really helpful to develop. So what I'm talking about is a strategy for how to use soft skill of communication and EQ to deliver what you get intuitively. Intuition is something totally different because I could give lots of examples of some questionable business people who did use their intuition to create massive wealth for themselves. Because when business people tap into their intuition, whether they can use it, it's sort of like neutral, right? It's like a screwdriver. Like, you can use it as an instrument to tighten the screw, or something else sort of murdery, like it's just whatever, however you use the tool. Intuition is just a tool. So once you learn how to use it, you can use it for whatever you want. So I have clients that I'm specifically working with them on how to be bolder in their new position in the organization they've been either hired by, or, the organization that they've gotten a new position inside of. And then what we work on is, how do you translate what you recognize and know in a way that lands for the team you're in, even if you're part of the team or you're now guiding the team. But on top of that, it's, what do you want to use your intuition for? It has to align with your values. So some people's values are compassion and kindness and a world where it's inclusive, and like that's their values. For some people, it's, succeed, grow the bottom line, scale the organization. So they use their intuition for that. I had one client who used it for dating. She'd been single for 12 years. And she was extremely successful as a lawyer, a very, very specific kind of contract lawyer. And she used her intuition to do online dating. And I will tell you that her experience, she was my client like 7.5 years ago, prompted me to write like an outline for a book called When in Doubt, Don't Go Out. It's an intuitive dating guide. And I will write that. I've got some other stuff I got to work on, but that book will get written, because all the things she did taught me that you can apply intuition to anything. I've had doctors apply it to, listening to clients who come, like patients who come in, and all the data of all the tests is not pointing to what this patient is telling them. However, this doctor knows to trust the intuition of people in their own bodies. Like I've had clients catch cancer that doctors, didn't catch. So you can use it in health. I have one client, I do not suggest this, by the way, but she has a much higher tolerance for risk than most people I know. She's used it to play the market, and has made a lot of money taking chunks of cash, investing it, and then day trading and using intuition to do that. I've had people do it on real estate deals. I've had people use it for selling their own, like their companies. I've used it to pick right Airbnbs. I mean, come on, sometimes Airbnbs have great pictures and you're like, wow, this place is tiny. Like who would have known? So you can use it for anything. So that's the question to ask yourself is, if you had access to something that could give you insight and clarity, no matter how high of stakes the decisions you're making are, would you be willing to adopt habits to teach you to do it? That's sort of the question. So do you want to use it to deepen relationships with your team? Do you want to use it to deepen your connection with your spouse? Do you want to do self-work? You can heal crap that's in your way of like really showing up boldly and confidently. It's really up to you. You can use it for whatever you want.
I appreciate all of this so much. I just have to tell you that like I said in the beginning, I think this is so powerful. And I think it's when people can tap into this and recognize that this is there to just help you be more successful, like you said, in what you already want to do, your goals and your values. And it is just kind of I love how you said the pause of like stopping and saying, okay, I intentionally want to do this. I want to make things better. Before we wrap up, we have about 5 more minutes. Do you have any other like suggestions on that building confidence? Anything else that you would like to pass on to this group?
Yeah, a few different things. So one, I just want to say before our time is up, if you're watching this or listening to this and you're like, well, like, how could I work with Shoshanna? I offer single intuitive strategy consults, like just 1 hour of my time. It's sort of like low cost of entry. We can have a conversation. I can look at what you're dealing with and we can get right into intuitive strategy about it. We use my intuition, which I've been training for 30 years. So this is less about you training yours. So we'll make sure that gets in the notes, and I'll make sure to share that with y'all. So this is an acronym. My PR person was like, you need an acronym. So I'm going to teach you an acronym that I think if you adopt the steps in this acronym and remember it the next time you're in a high stakes or you're stuck in analysis paralysis. Actually, that is for a session. I'll send you guys the notes so we can put it in, but it's for a consult. That's a different link. So here it is. Okay. PAL, PAL, pause. And we talked a lot about pausing. So pausing just means stopping before you respond, pausing before you act, and recognizing when you're in reaction. That's what pause means. So, what I suggest is even if you're in a meeting, this is hard, y'all, but if you're in a meeting and someone's like, what do you think about that? Take a moment. Like, I know it's weird. People may look at you weird if you take 5 seconds to breathe, but it's rare in my experience that people are like, are you having some kind of fit? Are you okay? Like, people for the most part are really fine with people taking a moment. It really is okay to take a moment. So pause. When you get an email that just literally makes you want to throat punch somebody because you already went over that 5 times, before you hit reply, take a moment and pause. So pause. P is for pause. A is for ask. Ask questions. So the kind of questions you want to ask so that your intuition can get louder is questions that are open, not fixing. So sometimes we get emails like that. We're super frustrated and we want to like fix that this person who we are like, oh, why do they not understand what we're doing? But like, really, you can ask a question that's broader. Like, how can I communicate with this person so that my communication lands? What's going on over there that's having us be on different pages? How can I deepen my connection to this CEO so that I can be the best OBM for their organization? Like questions like that. Broad, open-ended, curiosity-focused questions. And then the L stands for listen. And this part's the hardest. So when we are in emotional reaction, it's harder to listen. So remember, like, how do you know you're in an emotional reaction? I think most of us are of an age and have enough EQ, given that you guys are OBMs, probably high EQs here, I imagine, all that when you're in an emotional reaction, obviously you don't want to just fly off. But so listen, what is emotion? And let that kind of like get its own little moment. And then take a moment and recognize what is your intellect. How you know it's your intellect is it's familiar. It's really familiar. You're like, oh, yeah, that's what I already know about Joe. That's what I already know about working with Joe. That's what I already know about Joe that when I made the proposal for this team, that's what I put in okay, those are the things I know. What I need is what I don't know. What I need is insight into the area of Joe that would allow me to connect to the CEO so that I could provide what he's looking for, even though his communication skills stink and he's not doing a good job telling me what he actually needs. He's only telling me what he doesn't need, and I need to know what he needs. So your intuition can actually give you insight and understanding about this guy that you're not getting through your emotional reaction, throat punching moment with the email, or the intellect, what you already know about Joe, his organization, and what he hired you for. What you need is this third option called insight. So you pause, you ask curiosity-led questions that are open. You're wanting insight, you're not wanting answers. You don't need to fix something. That's what logic is for, right? If Joe is like, you're not providing the thing and you need to go back to the contract, that's fixing a problem. That's different. But if you're getting an email from someone who just doesn't understand the email that you sent in the morning and the response is like, they just did it, whatever you said didn't land, you're not on the same page, you don't need logic for that. You need insight. That's intuition. So pause, ask, listen, and that's it. And then it takes doing it over and over and over and over again. Kind of like when you brush your teeth, kind of like when your dentist is like, could you please floss like once a day? That would be so great. And you're like, ugh. And then you put the floss by the sink so you don't forget. Put in your calendar, right? Like, when today am I going to pal it? When am I going to be a pal with my intuition? When can I put that in when I prep for my meetings? I just need 5 minutes to pal. That's it. Just 5 minutes, little powwow with myself to just tap in and ask, pause, ask, and listen.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. I mean, that alone is magic right there. And again, I want to make sure people know where to find you, right? So your website is that currently
It's still
which
simplespirit.com.
okay.
You can also find me on LinkedIn, Shoshanna French. And I posted into the chat the link for intuitive strategic consults. If people want like information and like a little dive in so we can look about leadership. That's the one. And then there was another one you guys post. That's more like one where I just intuitively look for you. But either way, find me. I'm super easy to find. If you go to my website, there's links for booking time with me. And I respond to all emails. There's nobody else that responds to them. It's me. So my email is now in the chat. If you want to email me because you have questions about what we just talked about, please message me. We can chat. I can answer questions, and I can also share resources, because when I learned intuition, it took 6 years and a lot of meditation. And it was like a very metaphysical way to approach something that's pretty practical. So that's always been my goal, is how do I practically teach people how to use this really cool ability that everyone has?
Oh, fantastic. And I want to share that for anyone who's like, "Ooh, that sounds really interesting. Maybe I'm curious, but it sound if you've never done a reading like this, it is so, I will say, validating, because a lot of times you get on the call with someone who can read you, and then they're telling you things that, yes, you did know, but now someone else sharing with you just amplifies it. So it goes back to that confidence, and it goes back to unlocking all this. So thank you, thank you, thank you, Shoshana, for being here today. We really appreciate it. We'll make sure all these links get into the show notes and all the other places that we post this, and we will see everybody next week.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.